not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. Friday Java on the second day of November 2018, beaming to you from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Some editorial notes here, or programming notes, whatever you want to call them. The election, of course, the midterm election will be on a Tuesday, and it'll be on Tuesday, November the 6th. We urge people to vote early if you can in your jurisdiction. If not, to vote on November the 6th. One thing is apparent about this entire cycle in many of the states, and we'll go over those in a minute, that many of these elections are within the margin of error, which means they are turnout elections. They're sort of seesawing around. We'll look at the latest from the people at the Crystal Ball, the University of Virginia at Charlottesville. And when we mention them, we also remember Heber Heyer, a martyr that died at the hands of white supremacists in Charlottesville. We'll not forget it, and we encourage you to not forget it when you go to the voting place on the 6th of November. We're looking at this election, and what we see shaping up here across a very rough pattern, that it'll be sort of a 50-50 election. We do anticipate at this point in time that the Democrats will have enough seats to take over the House. The Senate is a little bit more precarious, and we'll talk about it in a minute here as we move along in the program from the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Speaking of Jerry Pippin, you will hear a program that Jerry and I did for the 2012 midterm elections, one of the things coming up. We'll also cover the Brazil election. We've been working on that since Sunday. Telesur will fall back upon them. We'll also fall back upon Glenn Ewalt. He is reporting from Buenos Aires, the Brazilian in Brazil. And that part and how this so-called newfound populism has emerged in various countries, Brazil being either the 7th or the 8th in population and also in terms of its economic size. In other words, it's in the first 10 nations, not shabby at all. But looking at how populism comes in from various standpoints, the special presentation where you'll hear from the president-elect Vasaros and also the challenger from the Workers' Party and several political scientists and commentators address this issue of the so-called new populism that is in various countries. We see it in Germany. Chancellor Merkel will not run or stand for re-election there. We saw it in Brexit in the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, or whatever you want to call it. Its ugly head there. You have right-wing or fascist governments in Poland and various other countries. And of course in the U.S. we have the DJ Trump administration. And we'll be talking on the next few days about why people vote for these right-wing regimes that disguise themselves as being populist. If we go back 60 years, there was a similar regime in Germany. It's called the National Socialist Party under Schicklgruber, otherwise known as the Führer or the Hitler, the leader. And they used some of the same propaganda techniques as are being used today. Now, they did not have social media, but they did use newspapers, they used radio. Mussolini himself had been in the radio business. He had fascism in Italy. And also Italy is in the crux of a right-wing so-called populist party also. One of the big problems here is that people have bought hook, line, and sinker this idea of quote-unquote elites without really defining whom the elites are. DJ Trump talked about draining the swamp and then became the leader, the captain of a swamp ship that's still sailing off the coast of Washington, D.C. in the Potomac. These kinds of things turn these so-called pro-business candidates, that's usually the element there. Vasaros will be pro-business, no doubt about it, in Brazil. He will also be quote-unquote law and order. Law and order was a part of Schicklgruber's on the Nazis' platform. DJ Trump now is sending troops to the border with Mexico. First just 3,000 or 4,000. It could be up to 15,000. The only question we have, why didn't he just send 100,000 and get it over with? They could be on the border there and doing whatever duties they need to do. The problem is this is all smoke and mirrors. He was also talking about just an executive order to get rid of so-called birthright citizenship. That cannot be done. Now, we say that with a caveat because of the Supreme Court. If the justices there, for whatever reason, 5 of them, a majority, decided that it could be done, it would be like Plessy versus Ferguson. It would take us 5 to 10 years or whatever to undo the problem that arises. And this is part of the populism situation you look at in these various countries. Now, some of them, Brazil, for instance, after the Supreme Court effectively impeached the president of Brazil that had succeeded Mr. Lula, and then they prevented Lula from running, because had Lula run just based upon his personality, he would have been elected the president. But the president that they had there, Diner, was at one time a member of was the Communist Party, a Marxist. she had been jailed by the fascist junta. So those are the kinds of things that happened. Brazil being a little bit different, they had left-wing governments there, but they also were just 30 years from a military government, a junta, Similar situation in Chile under the fascist Pinochet. So all of these nations have been flirting with these various fascist types that had been able to rally support from the lower middle, in some countries, the working class, or parts of the working class. In Brazil, the same people that voted for Lula is what happened in the U.S. here. Many of the people that voted for Barack Obama voted for DJ Trump. So there needs to be new explanations of what is going on, and to understand what it is. Many of the political scientists look at elites, but the elites are not all of one, as they say, fabric. There are different kinds of elites. One of the things we have seen is that these so-called elites, the top 2 or 3%, not 1%, are in agreement basically on a number of things. One, the business-friendly attitude, the largest tax cut in the history of the nation that took place under DJ Trump. And you have some short-term benefits, which we cannot argue, that are happening. Lower unemployment or redundancies have come out because of the fight for 15. Amazon was finally forced, and also scarcity of labor, to pay their workers $15 an hour. That will take place, I believe, this week, in November. And the Walmarts of the world and various other characters of that nature had went to the $10 an hour plan. But that was not because of DJ Trump's economic program. But at the same time, the tariffs, etc., the United Steelworkers Union, some 30,000 plus, I should say, support the tariffs. The steel industries are coming back. Many of those, smaller size now, have rehired some of the workers. There's no argument with that. But at the same time, the price of particularly rolled steel and other steel products have went up. Therefore, the Ford Motor Company and various others are laying people off. They call it voluntary separations. That will be coming this year or early 2019. So in everything is not rosy at all. 2019 will be a very challenging year. So when you do go to election day, we say the economy is doing pretty well. Well, you look at it in terms of industrial capitalist economy. Yes, if you can get above 2.5% for your GDP, but you can't maintain it. That's what the problem is. And the problem is also at 3.7% unemployment redundancy rate. You still have that number of people unemployed. And of course you have numbers of people that are not counted, as DJ Trump and his cronies used to say, and at the same time a lot of people that are working part-time or have several part-time jobs to make one job. And then you have the issue of health care. Very important issue. The Republicans are trying to say, well, we support the skinny plans. But the problem there is the pre-existing conditions. They voted to scrap pre-existing conditions and basically sent it to the states. Some states would have honored pre-existing conditions. Most would have not. So that is what this election is about. It's not just about some little slogans. And that we're trying to see that start to shaping up here. Let's move. This is a commentary, and we'll move to the actual polling, and then we'll visit the people at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, and their crystal ball. Some of the information you get here will be from Old Boston Red's Ouija board, and we'll try to separate those out. Now, this is for Friday morning. At Real Clear, they have a listing here. This is first up the state of Georgia's governor's race between Kemp and Abrams. The Atlanta Constitution's poll here. They are tied at 47-47. From the state of Minnesota, Johnson versus Waltz. This is a KSTP Survey USA poll. Has Waltz at 49 and Johnson at 41. That's an 8-point margin. That's the most I've seen of any of these polls out of Minnesota. Out of Connecticut, the governor's race there, we have Stefanos Noski up by 2 over Lamont. We've seen Lamont ahead also. Out of the state of Alaska, this is Alaska Research, has Gavin up by 1. This is the House race between he and Old Man Young. Gavin 49, Old Man Young 48. Very close race there. Out of Virginia, the 10th district there, Waxton up by 11 over Barbara Comstock. That's been pretty evident. Waxton has been ahead in the polls we've seen. This is on a Thursday. Out of the state of Florida, the Senate race there between Scott, who's the governor, and Bill Nelson. Nelson's ahead by 2 points. We have a different poll here from St. Petersburg newspaper there. Has Nelson at 49 and Scott at 47. Identical polls would stand up by 2. We have a third poll here out of Florida. The Trafalgar poll, that's a Republican group, poll has Nelson up by 2. So what we can ascertain there, that race is very, very close. It is a turnout poll. Out of the state of Arizona, McSally and Sinema. We broadcast that debate. Had Sinema at 45 and McSally at 52. It's a 7-point race with that particular situation. Out of the state of West Virginia, Senate race there, with Senator Meacham and Morrissey. Meacham up by 5. That is a little bit above the margin of error. Another one out of West Virginia has Meacham up by 5. This is our friends at the Emerson Polling Company across from the Common in Boston. They have Meacham at 47 and Morrissey at 42. A little different poll tech there. Out of the state of Tennessee, this is the Senate race also, have a little bit closer. Blackburn at 49 to 45 for Breezen. It's a 4-point spread. We have another poll out of Tennessee, the Senate race there. This is Emerson has Blackburn up by 8 points, 52 to 44. We have an Emerson poll out of the state of Texas. Now hadn't seen this one. This has Lion Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. Lion Ted at 50, Beto O'Rourke at 47. Another tight race there. Cruz is up by 3. This is one we'll be watching. Out of the state of New Mexico, the Senate race in New Mexico, Hendrick up by 15 over over Rich. There's a 3-person race here. Johnson also has 7. This is KOB TV. That was that poll. Out of the state of Pennsylvania, Franklin Marshall poll has Casey up by 15. Casey has been in the double digits in the state of Pennsylvania. Out of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Warren is up by 22 over Diehard. This is another Trafalgar group poll out of the state of Florida. The governor's race in Florida has Mr. Gillum up by 2 points, 48 to to 46. We also have another poll there. There's more than one. A CNN poll has Gillum up by 1. Another one of these 1 or 2% in the margin of error type of polls going on in the state of Florida, out of Colorado. Magellan poll there. Polis is up by 5 over Stapleton. That's the Democrat. Another Colorado poll by Onsite. Keating has Polis up by 8 over Stapleton out of Colorado. Out of Tennessee, the governor's race there, Lee is up by 10 in Tennessee. That is Onsite. Keating. Tennessee CNN has Lee up by 10. And Emerson poll in that particular race has Lee up by 13. Here. Okay. Out of the state of Texas, Wheelchair Abbott's up by 8 according to this, 51 to 43 over Valdez. New Mexico, Grisham up by 5 over Pierce in the state of New Mexico. That's the governor's race there. Pennsylvania, Franklin Marshall poll, Wolf's up by 26. That's never really been a race. Out of Arkansas, Hutchinson, this is the Arkansas poll, up by 24. Hutchinson's been up by double digits. Out of the state of South Dakota, this is a KELG Mason-Dixon poll. Sutton and Noel. Sutton is the cowboy here. Knowing, I think it's how I pronounce his name. Her name is up by 3. Very close race for the singing cowboy in the state of South Dakota. In Jersey 7, Matsowicz is up by 8 over Lance. That's District 7. In New Mexico, District 1, Heartland's up by 8 over Arnold Jones. 51 to 43. New Mexico, that was District 1. New Mexico 2, Harrell is up by 5 over Small. Small. 47 to 42. In the state of West Virginia, that's District 3, that's a House race. Miller is up by 7 over Judah. I think that's pronouncing that correctly. That's an Emerson poll. This is a Harvard Harris. I'm not sure why they're dealing with that. There's DJ Trump at 44. There's an NPR Marxist. This is DJ Trump's at 41. So it's kind of all over the place here. We're not reporting Rasmussen because they've been an outliner all around. A generic ballot, Harvard Harris, that's by Pinhead. Penn is now the owner over there of the former Harris poll. Has Democrats up by 9. NPR, PBS, Marxist poll up by 9. Marxist College, upstate New York. We'll go to Wednesday. A little bit of clarity here. Has a race in Arizona between McSally. This is on Wednesday the 31st. Tied up between Sinema and McSally. The CNN has Sinema up by 4 points in that race. In Nevada, Rosen's up by 3 over Heller. First time I've seen Rosen, that's a CNN, with caution. The Missouri race has Claire McCaskill and Hockley tied up. That race has been very, very close. And this is NBC Marxist poll. Has Blackburn ahead by 5. That was on Wednesday. Another one, the Fox News poll, Blackburn up by 12. In the state of Indiana, Senate race there, Donnelly over Braun by 3 points. Fox News poll actually has Senator Donnelly up by 7 points. So he's either in the margin of error doing a little bit better. Out of North Dakota, Kramer versus Heidi Heidekamp. Up by 9 in North Dakota. A Grabbers poll out of Michigan, the Senate race at Debbie Stabenow at 54 to 41 over James, up by 13 points. Tammy Baldwin, this is a Market University poll. Tammy Baldwin, she's been pretty much by double digits. She's up by 11. A Connecticut, that's an Emerson poll. Murphy up by 21. Feinstein by 9. That's a Berkeley poll in California. Emerson in Maine. King's up by 13. He's been up double digits. This is at a Western and Northeast University poll out of the Commonwealth. Elizabeth Warren up by 30. Wisconsin governor's race. Evans and Boss Walker tied up. Nevada poll has Sisolak up by 1 over Laxell. Arizona, Ducey's been ahead 18 points there. A CNN poll, though, has it closer, Ducey and Garcia. Ducey by 7. And the Fox News poll had him by 18. So dueling there. Out of Alaska, Dunleavy, we covered that debate, 43 to 42 over Borchich. And out of Oregon, this is a Huffman Research, some Republican poll has Brown up by 3 in the state of Oregon. Tennessee, Fox News poll has Lee up by 17, an NBC poll the same. An Emerson poll in Connecticut has Lamont up by 7. So these polls are going a little bit back and forth here. Sununu up by 8, that is in New Hampshire. Mills up by 8, that is in Maine, that's an Emerson poll. Newsom up by 18, that's Berkeley, that's out in California. Western and Northeast, old Charlie Baker up by 38. He's been double digits there, so we report that one. Watkins versus Davis, that is Kansas 2nd District, Davis by 4. And going backs and forth. In Maine 2nd District, this is Emerson, that was the New York Times poll, incidentally. Harris by 1. Paphos and Edwards, Paphos by 2. It's in New Hampshire. These are all Emerson polls, Emerson College. And let's see what else we can scare up here. Dakola's up by 4. That's a Susquehanna poll out of Pennsylvania. That's House District 16. And the Economist YouGov has a Democrats. This is a generic ballot up by 7. Wait a minute. Reuters has them up by 7. And the Economist YouGov by 5. It's enough of that polling. We'll now go to the crystal ball itself and find Professor Sabato. Oops. If we're lucky. This is from the state of Alaska. Well, this is an older poll here. Well, this is showed a closing in on a young Gabin. She's the daughter of a former senator from Alaska. Oh, this is more survey there. 49.7 would vote for Young if the election were held that day. 46 said they would vote for Ms. Gabin. So we'll be keeping an eye on the state of Alaska and see where it is. More information here. Mark Vorkich, and Dunleavy. More debates are coming up here. We've been covering these debates. We're looking at the Anchorage Daily News here. Sparks fly in the final debate. We'll have some of the final debate. We'll leave the final debate now, and we need to go to Professor Sabato. Now is a good time to take a break. We shall return in a... Here we go. Let's go first to Arizona. This is McSally. This is ABC 15, a TV station out there. This is the new polling numbers. It was on Wednesday. The race is still close, according to them. Exclusive a poll by OH Predictive Insight Polls. This is where the 7-point lead for McSally. 2% of the people are undecided, and 1% will vote green. On the flip side, it mentions here a CNN poll that was released on Wednesday has Sinema with 51% of the vote compared to Sally with 47% of the vote. And from the poster here, this is Mike Noble. He said if Kavanaugh did not happen, I think it would be extremely tight race. If not, I'd actually say the edge would go to Sinema. Sinema had the edge earlier there after seeing the poll, seeing results. Everything else, I think McSally will end up winning the election. Well, that is quite possible in Arizona, but it did not have to be that. But they spent millions of dollars there. We'll go back and revisit that on the week that was and on the Monday morning quarterback, which will be the last day before the voting. Nonetheless, 5 days to go is the title here. On November the 1st, it was released, and Kyle Klondike is the managing editor there. Now, these are the Crystal Ball house ratings, and we'll just throw in the Ouija board while we are here. David Valledo, he's out of California 31, from likely Republican to lean Republican. In California 49, Darrell Issa, likely Democrat there. We would agree. Stephen King, now this Steve King character out of Iowa 4. He's the one that's labeled a white supremacist, leans Republican. We'll need to look at some things there. And Nevada 4, that's likely Democrat there. And we'll go down some of these Republican toss-ups. Denham, that is California 10. Knight, that's California 25. Rockenbacher, California 48. Royce, California. Oh, that's open. And Young is David Young, Iowa 3. Another open seat in Kansas 2. Jenkins. Andy Barr, that is in the Kentucky 6. These are all toss-ups. Fasco, New York 19. So that really has not changed. They basically are going along the same here. And in Pennsylvania, an open seat, Lamb there. A toss-up with the Democrats. The Crystal Ball only offers one toss-up. There's Walt's old seat in Minnesota 1. That is in southern Minnesota. And several likely Democrats here. Mamie Waters, that's in California. These are Republican seats. Kaufman in Colorado 6. Ross Latham, that's around Miami. We would agree here. It is leans a Democrat. Kevin Yoder, that's Kansas 3. And Michigan 11 is an open seat. And Jason Lewis, that is in Minnesota. So what we're seeing basically, based upon the polling in Minnesota, we see 2 House districts opening up in Minnesota, the 2nd and the 3rd opening up for that. So it'd probably be a 50-50 in the sense that not certain what happened in southern Minnesota 1. We'll take another look at it and you'll get that shortly here, dear. So, but we see Minnesota 8. That's more or less out of the reach. The Republicans will pick it back up again. That thing is seesawed around. Barbara Comstock, we see that race as Barbara Comstock going in the wrong direction there. Washington 8, Reichard, it's an open one, leans Democrat. And let's see what else here. Nothing really new here, that McSally's old seat, likely Democrat. McSally, that was one of the districts, even in a year like 2016. Hillary Clinton carried that particular situation. And what words of wisdom do they have? But before then, we have a small matter of the 2018 election to settle. We are still agonizing over the final picks. A lot of people, and this is one thing to remember about models and even predictions. You're very, very lucky if you get 100% of your predictions correct. There are all kinds of things can happen. There's some of these districts that have been a lot of polling, numerous polling on numerous events. We can track things. The model can track them. And there are others that have been scarcely reported, and there are other ones that the polls have just been incorrect. So what they are saying here is right now, House right now, we have 212 House seats at least leaning to the Democrats, 202 are leaning to the Republicans, and 21 in the toss-up categories. While we are still gathering information about toss-ups, we do have a sense to where we are leaning in the races. At this moment, we probably pick Democrats in a 12 of the toss-up races, Republicans in 9. That would give the Democrats a gain of 29. So let's say now we're thinking overall Democratic gain of around 30. That could happen, and we'll talk more about that. What we can say now, according to our Ouija board model, the Democrats will, unless something extraordinary happens, will win the House. And I think if you look at the Republican private polling, they basically concluded this in some of the races. One side possibility the Republicans maintaining control of is an old political science theory called surge and decline, which, let's see, John R. Pedcock and Mr. Shaw in a piece this week. Historically, one of the factors that set up presidential parties to lose House races in the midterm is that often it overperformed in a presidential year. Well, yes and no. Winning a number of seats with the help of the president's coattails. We didn't see as much of that with D.J. Trump, because D.J. Trump in most areas did not have very long coattails at all. But Trump and the Republicans didn't actually enjoy any surge in 2016. They lost a net of 6 seats that the Republicans end up holding the House. Keep that theory in mind as a post-election possibility, and we'll get to that in just a second here. Some real talk here. We're going to pick all the House seats, but we're going to get many of them wrong. Many of the races are very close. That's true, and could go either way, and it'll turn into a turnout election. The Senate includes 65 Senate seats that are not on the ballot, obviously, and they are safe. And this is understanding the Senate. The Senate ratings show 50 seats at least leaning Democrat, 45 seats at least leaning Democrat, or 5 toss-ups. Now, governor's races are totally different. Our ratings show 22 governorships at least leaning Republicans, 18 are leaning Democrats. At toss-ups, the Democrats would like to see at least 5 of those toss-ups. Still, split the toss-ups for the 5-5 Democrats would have 23 governorships, a net gain of 7. Republicans would have 27, a net loss of 6. And it'd be interesting to see what happens out in Alaska, because the independent candidate Walker pulled out, and the Democratic Gavin is in there, and then you have the Native Americans that are the Aboriginal peoples there controlling the outcome. Now let's see here. Okay. Now we have Republicans in our lean Republican column that should be safe. King as well as Duncan Hunter. These are people under actually indictments in a Republican districts. How Republicans could hold the House. This is on November the 1st. There is no systematic relationship between the turnout rate in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party's share of the two-party congressional vote. Midterm often features a decline for the president's party after a surge in the House in the presidential election. But the Republicans enjoyed no surge, period, and could limit the decline this year. A model based on history and the dynamics of surge and decline suggests the Republicans should lose House seats, but they remain well positioned to hold the House majority. However, certain factors not included in the model, like a new House map in Pennsylvania, which we did include, and a high number of Republican retirees. Is 2018 will turnout be the story? Probably not. Empirical facts is that turnout does not display a systematic bias in American national elections, despite the typical low turnout rates of Democrat partisans and the greater effort by Democratic campaigns to get out the vote. Two of the most powerful influences, the incumbent president's job approval rating, which is DJ Trump in the 40s. That's basically where Barack Obama was when he won re-election. How many members of Congress are holding seats for which they are in a bad fit? So these factors pretend for 2018, contrary to turnout wisdom, models using these contextual facts dominate turnout effect and predict that the Republicans will still be in charge next year, abide with a reduced majority in the House. There's no doubt, we're not going to quibble over that particular one. The turnout dimension, as demonstrated in the preceding figure, where you haven't seen that, we'll append this. The Republican Party share the two-party congressional vote. Now, one of the situations is in some of these races, we do have a third party, either libertarian, and if you're in a very close election where 1 or 2 points, less than 1 point, could decide the election, your third party candidate does hold the straw. And then the big argument is, does it hurt the Republican or does it help the Democrat? One could press further by examining the relationship between the vote and turnout within 435 congressional districts, which we did, but did not present here due to space limits. And I don't believe that one. We examined the relationship during 4 eras when the districts were constant, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. One of the things we've maintained here at the Ouija board, the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s in many of these districts do not apply because they've changed demographically to the extent that they've either become blue, red, or a mixture of both. They call purple. In Tennessee, for instance, in the 70s, you would have had the Democrats in power, and even somewhat into the 80s, Al Gore was there, but it all changed. Between turnout and voters that already systematically distributed around the 0 point, but another way the vote varies positively within some districts and negatively in others. Sometimes turnout seems to increase the Republican vote. Sometimes it seems to drive more to the Democrats. Most of the slumps, however, were small and usually statistically insignificant, based as they were on elections, increasing consistent with the point made above and about the influence of the presidential contest. Distribution tends to show a Democrat tilt when Democrats were winning the presidential race during the decade, but it tilted Republican. That's basically what we said. The bottom line again is we're unable to find any consistent tendency for one party to profit with a high turnout. Turnout oscillation can work on behalf of either party, is explained in detail there. And this is partisan vote in America here. And let's see, if turnout is not a systematic factor, August Campbell writes about the linkage between off-year congressional seat losses and the surge of the presidential election almost 60 years ago. This observation proved in the answer to the question why the presidential party is almost certain to lose congressional seats in off-year elections, but especially in the first midterm election. The following figures update the basic pattern. Campbell's insight was very straightforward. In the winning presidential candidate's coattails pulled into office, partisans were not but not necessarily good for their district. Coattails may be a bit weaker than they were in the past, but have not disappeared as viewed the perspective of voters' share and of seats by winning the presidential candidate's party. Weaknesses of coattails. Well, there were no coattails in 2016, and the Republicans, what they've done is they have nationalized their ticket. And you can see that evident in the debates we've covered, that they all mimic each other on the health care option. The only thing they can say is, since campaigning for 8 years, for 8 years against Obamacare, and trying to destroy Obamacare when DJ Trump took office, and now saying, well, we are in favor of a quote-unquote health care plan, a national health care plan. And we want to keep pre-existing conditions with a caveat. So this is the old trick that you take your opposition, your opponent's positions, and make them your own. But they can't do this. This is for a candidate running against an establishment candidate, and this is not the case here. They already have a very, very bad track record, horrible record. They've always opposed national health care, and these are the same characters that back in the 60s opposed Medicare and called it socialized medicine. It hasn't changed. You had Helen and Louise, or whoever they were, came out against Hillary Clinton's conservative managed care program that she put forward, never got off the ground. It was too complicated. But we did get Obamacare off the ground, and without the sabotage of the Obamacare site, etc., we're finally able to put it off, and you'll have Jerry Pippin here talking about it. Basic premise that Jerry had is people, once they had an opportunity to utilize Obamacare, they would like it. And that is what's happened. The statistics bear that out. There are very, very few people that oppose Obamacare. And many Democrats, incidentally, also are running on a universal or single payer, what do you want to call it, Medicare for all. It has different flavors, just as the Fight for 15, some of these Fight for 15, the workers, unlike the workers at Amazon, will be able to get, or will not be able to get it till after the 2020 election, a long time, 2 to 3 years away. Now, Republican losses in 2018, based upon historic patterns and the dynamic of surge and decline, the Republicans are almost certain to lose seats in the House. The Senate is more complicated. Obviously, it is a 6 year situation there. they're not likely to lose anywhere near as many as commentators have put out there. And with turnout, they put it here, several things here. This is actually from 1954 to 2014, and with turnout here, and R square is what, 70, R square is 15. Won't get much into that. But the preceding table summarizes the effect of turnout surge and decline dynamic and presidential approval of off-year elections from 54 to 14. The equation predicts that the Republicans could lose as few as 11 and as many as 24 in 18. The equation does not take into account other factors such as redistricting of Pennsylvania and relatively large number of Republican retirements, and it should have taken that in. This John R. Petcock is from UCLA, moved on to Missouri, the chair of the political science department. And Darren Shaw, distinguished teaching professor, so forth and so on, at the University of Texas in Austin. So that's what it is. It'd be interesting to see what VOK would have to say about this and where it stands. Let me just do one other thing here. Google, incidentally, is under fire for sexism there. Google workers from Hong Kong to California, points in between, went on strike today. We'll have that on an open source report. First, let's go to Bismarck, North Dakota, and thousands of natives in North Dakota getting free IDs. Efforts by American Indian tribes in North Dakota to provide a free identification with street addresses to thousands of members advanced on Tuesday, the Tuesday elections. The free program launched with the help, including the Lakota People's Lord Project. For dimensions, we talked about them before. And according to Phyllis Young, she's an organizer for the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation of Lakota, for the Lakota People's Lord Project. Strict voter ID rules are taking effect after the Supreme Court ruling. A federal lawsuit filed on Tuesday by Spirit Lake Sioux also alleged that the 9/11 system on the reservation is characterized by disarray, error, confusion, missing, or conflicting addresses. The Brennan Center noted the lawsuit seeks a more limited injunction. Something the appeals court indicated in an earlier lawsuit might be more successful. The state officials say not requiring a street address could lead to people voting in the wrong district, etc. Supreme Court in a lawsuit. This is the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa members. This is in 2016. Sent the tribal members scrambling to make sure that tribal members' voices would be heard, especially in high-profile cases. This is in North Dakota. This is between Kramer and Heidi Camp. North Dakota's ID law comes just a month after Heidi Camp came just a month. She won by less than 3,000 votes with the help of Native Americans in 2012. Republicans had nothing to do with the updates amidst guarding against voter fraud. American Indian make up 5% of the population, and the Turtle Mountain, Chippewa, Standing Rock, Sioux, Spirit Lake, Sioux, and free affiliated tribes all launched programs to provide free IDs, and they have street mapping software. A total of more than 2,000 IDs is approaching half, roughly 5,000 Native Americans. A judge there, Havlin, has said don't possess the IDs under state rules. He based his figures on research by the University of Mexico and UCLA. Tribes believe the number is much higher, no doubt about that. The effort is being financed through donations. The Native American Rights Fund has given the tribes $50,000, and a GoFund set up by the Standing Rock have raised over $200,000. It does cost money. So this is from the Associated Press on the 31st of here. So let me make sure. Okay, this is a different House debate here. So where we are on the 2nd of November, we are finishing up the polling. And one note here, the American campaign season is too long, because as soon as we close the book next week on the 2018 midterms, people will be talking about the 2020 election. Obviously, the 2020 election is roughly almost 2 years off, and whom the presidential candidates will be is utterly impossible. All kinds of characters are appearing in Iowa, in New Hampshire. Twitter King Booker was there, based upon his Kavanaugh moment. That's something he doesn't want to have. The Democrats would be well advised to forget about Mr. Kavanaugh at this point in time and move on to other issues. The strongest issue they have on Election Day is health care, and all of their commercials should be pointing to health care, literally. Now, there are other factors out there, such as what happened with Google. A lot of these, what we call side issues, are coming up. Google has been putting up a good front. In fact, we gave a paper at a developers conference last year about diversity. And the year before that, the Google people had a diversity pointing towards women. But the situation is that Google and emerging nations have a responsibility not only to women, but to various other oppressed minorities. In the U.S., you have African Americans and Latinos. So when you talk about equality, you have to entertain these people. And of course, when you talk on a national situation with emerging nations, you're talking about in Asia and across various African countries. Nigeria, for instance, in I believe 2040 will be the third largest populous nation in the world. I'm assuming behind China and India. So that is where most of the business is to be done. We'll see you on the week that was. We didn't give the sports, but we'll get those tomorrow night. The World Series is over now, and we owe you a World Series report. We'll get one on the World Series now that it's over. The Red Sox have taken the crown away, and the Dodgers are recuperating. Sore arms, sore feet, sore this, sore that. And now we have the basketball season has just opened up. College football is winding down. We'll be getting into various division playoffs and all kind of machinations in the NBA around which stars where. We don't cover the NFL out of respect for Colin Kaepernick, and the protesters there until that situation is put aside and he returns to professional football, or a settlement to his liking in the Player Association is done. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was tomorrow morning. We also have a numbers man report. We have some figures out here to explore and talk about jobs, where they're going, talk about layoffs, where they are going also. And we'll get an open source report in the next a few days, particularly on the Google workers. It may be shorter than normal.